All right, well, thanks for joining us. We're here with Pastor Kivett, and as Pastor Rick spoke this morning, we're just kind of switching up seats everywhere, and but we're having fun. We're looking forward to getting to talk more about Pastor Rick's sermon, but first, we always start off with an icebreaker, get the conversation going, and since it is March the 14th, we had someone very graciously in the church bring several pies today for Pie Day, which naturally goes right into our question.
Yeah. Pie. So I have blueberry pie here, and I really like blueberry pie a lot. And it's really good. You have apple pie.
Yep.
Is that your favorite kind of pie?
No.
No?
No, my favorite was taken, so that's why I got this. So I think, so my favorite would be chocolate pie, with the meringue on top and stuff.
Yeah.
That got gone real quick.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Mine would be like the chocolate pie. I don't even know what you call it, except I know that at a restaurant in Denton, they have this chocolate pie that is amazing, and it does not have the coconut in it. Because you have some chocolate pie that has coconut in it.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, that's...
oh, no.
Coconut anything is a no.
That's terrible.
But I don't even remember what it's called now, but chocolate pie without coconut is my favorite. So the question that we thought that we would open up with you is, what is your favorite type of pie? And it could be just about anything, and I imagine we're going to have some off-the-wall answers with that. But take some time and talk about your favorite pie. What is your favorite type of pie? And while you're doing that, we're going to eat our pie.
So as we finish chapter 4, Pastor Rick taught on the last two verses, Ephesians 4:31 and 32.
Hold on a second.
Oh, yeah.
I need to clean some blueberry pie out of my teeth.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Keep going.
Oh, my word. So we're just going to go with it. And he started off with talking about the high priestly prayer that Jesus prays in John chapter 17. And so as we look at that, we get a picture of what Jesus really makes a priority during this prayer before he's going to suffer.
Right. That's exactly right. And this high priestly prayer is really Jesus' way of being very real. I mean, we have record of it here. We know that he's praying this prayer in front of his disciples, and it's very, very pointed. It's God, I'm praying for myself. Yes, he's about to go through just excruciating pain. He's going to die for our sake, but then he's also praying for the disciples, but he's praying then for us as Christians. And Pastor Rick talked about how that's Salem Baptist Church. That's really millions upon millions of Christians since the church was begun on the day of Pentecost. But he very specifically prays for us something very simple. Verse 21 says that they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, that they also may be in us, that the world may believe that you have sent me. And even as Pastor Rick was talking, I thought about how the world is going to know that Jesus is sent from the Father by our unity. As we show this picture of us being unified, then the world's going to see, hey, there's something special here. And especially as we communicate, you know what? God the Father and Jesus are one in the same way, then that really goes a long way towards them, really, the world responding in such a way that's like, hey, I really want that. I want that salvation.
Yeah, so as we talk about this, like the question we're going to ask is, what do you find comforting about this high priestly prayer? And so as you pointed out, those things, like I think one of the things that hit me was, again, Pastor Rick touched on, like he could have prayed on a lot. He could have prayed for a lot, like happiness, for enjoyment, for safety, for all this stuff, because he knew what was coming for early Christians. But what he prays for is unity through this time. And so as I think about that, I think, man, do we hold unity in such a high standard as other things? What do we typically pray for ourselves as a church, for each other? Do we hold up unity in such a high regard as Jesus holds here? And then I even thought of, I asked myself this question: do I often strive for unity or perseverance? Like that's what kind of convicted. Do I strive for just putting up with people, or do I strive for true unity? Yeah. And that's something that really, just in my mind, kind of ticked with me about this.
Yeah. We just talked about unity in Ephesians chapter 4.
Mm.
Is verses 4 through 6 is really what we find we're supposed to be unified around these major components of the gospel. And maybe as a part of this, as you talk about what is it you find comforting about the high priestly prayer in this, maybe you go back to that passage, Ephesians 4, verses 4 through 6, and you look at here's what we're to be united around, and you have that conversation as well, and just remind yourself of it. All right, so we hope you had some great conversation about this idea of being comforted by the high priestly prayer, but then the conversation about the unity of the body, and that maybe some things were brought to your mind that haven't been there before about the unity of the body of Christ. Really, from this point, Pastor Rick transitioned into Ephesians chapter 4, verses 31 and 32. And 31 is really all of this stuff that is not supposed to characterize our lives. It's not supposed to define our lives. You've got bitterness in there. You've got wrath. You've got anger, clamor, slander, malice. All of these things that are not supposed to be a part of our lives. And even as Pastor Harper and I were talking a little while ago about this verse, we realized, you know what, there's kind of a progression that takes place here, and you mentioned this. So why don't you talk about that progression that we see in this verse?
Yeah, so if you look at the way Pastor Rick describes and really defines each of these things and looks at the uniqueness of each, because often we can read it and just kind of see, oh yeah, these are just bad, but there is a difference in each of these. Bitterness starts out as this emotion or this feeling in our soul almost, and then it starts to it's an outgrowing from there into wrath and anger, which is more of a response, an outburst, something flowing out from that emotion, and then into more action and even intentional action of trying to slander someone on purpose. And then it goes into basically this state of being, if you will, into malice, which is just a hardened heart. Yeah. As he talked about that congealed hatred, that was the thing that stood out.
He said that, but all I can think about is like the ham that's been sitting in the refrigerator, and then you pull it out, and the grease and stuff is congealed. That's what I was thinking of.
Yep.
I was like, that's nasty.
Exactly.
But that's the picture that we're supposed to have here.
So, I mean, there's that state of where it started off in an emotion, and if you let it go and you don't do anything and you don't try to control it, you don't try to make it right and control that, and you let it control you, that's where it gets into the point of being that hardened heart where no matter what anyone else does for you, no matter if it's good or merciful or gracious, your response is always evil.
Yeah. When you think about each one of these things that are supposed to be put away, because that's the idea here. You put these things away, get them out of your life. When you think about them, you realize this doesn't just affect me. It affects, if this is a part of my life and I'm defined by my bitterness and I'm defined by my anger and my outburst and my congealed soul, if I am defined by those things, then there's a lot of people around me who are also affected. And one of the things that we want you to think about and talk about there is very simply, how has bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, slander, malice affected you in the past? So you think about, okay, how has this practically affected me? But then also think about, how has it affected the people around me? Because a lot of times when you stop to think about, all right, here's how it's affected me, it has an impact. But you think about, but here's how it affected my wife. Here's how it affected my kids. Here's how it affected my parents. Here's how it affected my friends, my coworkers, all of that. That's when it starts to become a little bit more real about how really evil this is. And so take some time just to talk about how you have been affected by the things that are found here in verse 31 and how other people are affected.
As we talked about in verse 31, it's talking about this list of things to be put away, to kind of put off. But then it also talks about in the next verse about things we are supposed to be or becoming. And Pastor Rick talks about this, and there's kindness, there's tenderheartedness, and really it goes into this idea of forgiving others, and even as he talks about forgiving yourself and others, as Christ or as God in Christ has forgiven you. As we talk about that, we see kindness and tenderheartedness. Again, we can see those things as just being good things. Okay, so instead of being bad, be good. But when we look at the exact definitions and exactly what they're talking about, I heard somebody recently say this: being nice is caring what others think of you, being kind is caring about how others feel, or it's more of that idea of caring more about the others. And so as we think about this, what are some practical ways that we can be kind, kind of
Yeah.
coming away from this? How can we think of others, put others first in front of ourselves?
Yeah. Well, it's always a heart decision
Mhm.
as well as a lifestyle decision, because when you are characterized and defined by those things that are found in verse 31, the bitterness and the wrath and anger, all of those things, um, they are your lifestyle. It's not just a big blow up. It's rarely ever just a big blow up. There's some kind of heart issue that we have that prompts us to do that, to think that, to be that. And our minds have got to be renewed completely. You got to
Yeah.
get out with the old, in with the new. Um, I had a youth leader years ago who would say this statement over and he probably said it 500 sometimes, but that's a random number, 500 sometimes. Like I counted.
It's not a
But,
million yet.
but anyway, he would say garbage in, garbage out. The garbage goes in, you got to get the garbage out in order for your mind and your life to be positively impacted. So how do we get rid of the bitterness and the wrath and the malice, all of that stuff? Well, there's a certain level where we as individual humans can say, oh, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. But at the same time, because we are human, we don't have the strength to do it ourselves. And so that's where what Pastor Rick talked about, the strength of God that comes in and it helps us and it walks us through what it looks like to become kind. Where now we're not defined by our anger and those bitterness, but now we're defined by our kindness towards other people. But there's some very practical ways that we can become kind, and that's what we want to challenge you to talk about now. Okay, so how does a person go from the old to the new, from the really evil to the becoming kind? So talk about that for just a moment, and we'll come back and wrap up this conversation. All right, so you've had the conversation now about some very practical ways that you can become kind. Uh, but there's another component to this that we want to make sure that we highlight, because it doesn't just say forgive one another. It doesn't just say become kind, become tenderhearted. There's another phrase there at the end of this verse that is added in that is crucial to our understanding of how this is actually supposed to take place. The end of verse 32 says, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. And to that, I would just simply say, how much has God forgiven you?
Yeah, as he's talking about that, Pastor Rick even talked about that phrase, almost this idea more of forgiving yourself while forgiving others, and that stood out to me because I think we are harsh with other people sometimes, and that is very visible. But what's not visible is how harsh we are to ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, even recently, trying to understand more of what do I say to myself whenever I mess up? What do I say to myself whenever this happens? What thoughts am I having about myself? And I'm very critical of myself. And so often I have that critical thought of others. And so if you're harsh with others, it's probably because you're harsh with yourself. And so this idea of, whereas we saw in verse 31, this progression from beginning to end with an emotion to becoming a state of being almost. This next verse, I almost think, kind of works backwards, where it's in order to be kind, in order to be tenderhearted, you have to, in order to be forgiving others even, you have to understand how much Christ has forgiven you.
Yeah.
And to be able to live that out, that allows you to forgive others. That allows you to be tenderhearted, and that gut feeling that others are going through. That has to come because of what God has done in your life. And then it's that idea of becoming kind.
Right.
And so it's that progression almost backwards or reverse engineering it.
Yeah. I just think about as far as the east is from the west, that's how far my sin has been cast away. That's how much God forgave me. And if that can be my attitude towards myself, understanding that now God doesn't see me through the lens of my sin, He sees me with Christ's righteousness added to my account. But if that's how God sees me, then that is how I can look at other people and I can forgive other people for the wrongs that they may have done towards me. This past week, I was with somebody who I just sat and talked with for a while, but they are just having a really difficult time forgiving themselves for some things, and that's tough. But the next thing that you can do here is maybe just simply, and we'll end with this and let you take it and run with it. But maybe you just simply spend some time talking about the greatness of God's grace and the greatness of His mercy. Grace is receiving something you don't deserve. You've received salvation. You receive the blessings of life. Mercy is not receiving something that you do deserve. Maybe just spend some time talking about God's great grace and great mercy and how that has impacted you, and now how that forgiveness that you've received can impact other people around you. If our churches were defined by anything, may it be that we have been given much, and to whom much is given, much is required to go and give to other people. So, make sense?
That's good.
Good.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. You can always find more videos on our YouTube page, past videos of the pursuit, past sermon videos, and you can always subscribe so that you can get these video updates as soon as we put them on there. Thanks. See you next time.